He looked me in the eye and said, "She gives me everything you never could." I was begging him to stay, on my knees. He left anyway. What he didn't know was, I'm worth 8 times more than she'll ever be. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. We met in college during our sophomore year. I was the quiet type, always focused on my studies and future goals. I didn't talk much about my background because I didn't want people to treat me differently. I came from a wealthy family, but I didn't act like it. I wore simple clothes, carried the same backpack for years, and took the bus everywhere. To anyone looking, I seemed like a regular student trying to make ends meet. That's exactly how I wanted it. He was different from the others. He worked 2 part-time jobs, took extra classes, and always talked about building a better life. I admired his determination and how he never gave up, no matter how hard things got. He was charming, but humble, and he made me laugh. I found myself looking forward to seeing him every day, even if we just sat in the library together. Slowly, we got closer. Even though I cared about him deeply, I never told him the full truth about my life. I didn't want to risk changing the way he saw me. I wasn't trying to be dishonest. I just didn't think it was important at the time. Yes, my family had money. Yes, I managed a trust fund. And yes, I had investments in several tech companies that were already doing well. But those things didn't define me. I wanted him to like me for who I was, not for what I had. So I let him believe I lived a simple life. I told him I did some freelance work in finance, which wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole story. I worked remotely from my laptop, checking in on market trends, managing accounts, and making decisions that moved millions. But to him, I was just a quiet, supportive girlfriend who helped him study for exams and brought him coffee during late-night study sessions. We made a good team. I helped him with his projects, and he encouraged me to take breaks and enjoy life more. I never expected anything from him, and I never showed off what I had. I thought we were building something real, something strong, and maybe at the time, we were. But looking back, I realize how much I hid from him, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't want to ruin what we had. I believed love didn't need money to survive. I thought I was doing the right thing. Maybe I was wrong. After we got married, I quietly stepped into the role of his biggest supporter. He had big dreams, and I did everything I could to help him reach them. He got accepted into a competitive graduate program, and without hesitation, I covered his tuition and living expenses. He never asked how I managed to do it all. He simply accepted it and moved on. He believed I was doing small freelance jobs online. He never questioned how the bills were always paid on time or how we could afford the things we had. I handled everything from behind the scenes: utilities, groceries, car maintenance, all of it. He never seemed curious. I didn't mind at first. I liked taking care of things. I liked knowing I was helping build the future he talked about. When it came time to buy our first home, I arranged the finances. I made the down payment and managed all the paperwork. The house was in both our names, but most of the money came from me. Again, he never asked how I managed it. He just smiled and talked about how far we had come. He started to speak like he was the one carrying the weight, as if he was the reason our lives were comfortable. In conversations with friends or family, he often made it sound like he was the main provider. He liked using words like "my house" or "I worked hard for this." I stayed silent. I didn't need credit, and I didn't want to embarrass him. I thought it was just pride talking, and maybe it was. But slowly, I noticed the shift in how he saw me. He stopped thanking me for the things I did. He stopped including me in his future plans. He started acting like I had it easy, like I was just passing time while he built something important. I worked just as much as he did, often more. But because I didn't talk about it, he assumed it wasn't serious. He never showed interest in my work or asked about my day. His focus was always on himself, his goals, his success. I kept supporting him anyway. I believed in him. I thought marriage meant standing by each other no matter what. I didn't realize then that he had already started to drift away, not physically, but emotionally. The gap was growing, and I was the only one trying to hold it together. About a year before everything fell apart, something in him shifted. It wasn't sudden, but it was clear. He began traveling more than usual, always claiming it was for work or important meetings. His phone was always on silent, turned face down on the table. He stopped making time for small moments. No more morning coffee together, no evening chats about our day. Slowly, he was pulling away, and I felt it every day in the quietness between us. He used to look at me with warmth, but now his eyes felt cold, distant. When I asked if something was wrong, he brushed it off. He said I was imagining things, being too sensitive. He became irritable over little things. If I asked where he was going, he'd accuse me of being controlling. If I offered to help him with anything, he'd say I didn't understand what real ambition looked like. Those words stung. Real ambition. As if all the support I gave him, all the sacrifices I made, meant nothing. He told me I was too comfortable, that I lacked fire. I didn't recognize the person speaking. This was someone I stood beside for years, through every late night and setback, someone I believed in. And now, I was being dismissed like a burden, as if I had no drive, no value. Things kept getting worse. He came home less and less. When he was home, he was distracted, always on his phone, texting someone he never talked about. I tried to give him space, thinking maybe he was going through something he wasn't ready to share. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then one night, I found the photos. He left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for anything, but the screen caught my eye. There were pictures, clear as day, of him on a beach in the Caribbean, holding hands with a woman I'd never seen before. She wore designer clothes, had perfect hair, and smiled like she owned the world. They looked like a couple on vacation, not just friends or co-workers. I stared at the photos for a long time, my hands shaking. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I clicked through more pictures, dinners, sunsets, yacht rides. They were living a dream while I sat at home thinking our marriage was just going through a rough patch. Everything I feared had become real. She was everything I chose not to be. Loud, flashy, showy. The kind of woman who wore labels like armor. I had hidden my wealth, my background, my power to keep things simple, to be humble. And now, the man I built a life with had traded our quiet stability for a fantasy with someone who only mirrored what I had buried on purpose. That was the moment everything changed. The pain wasn't just from betrayal. It was from finally seeing the truth. He had already left me emotionally. The affair was just the proof I needed. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The pictures haunted me day and night. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time he walked through the door like nothing was wrong, it tore me apart. I knew I had to say something. I didn't want to lose him without trying. I still believed we could fix things, if not for love, then at least for all the years we had spent building a life together. One evening, after days of silence and building tension, I asked him to sit down. He looked annoyed, as if I was interrupting something more important. My voice trembled, but I spoke anyway. I told him I knew. I told him I saw the photos. I asked how long it had been going on, why he didn't talk to me, why he threw everything away. I was crying, trying to hold myself together, hoping he would finally show even a small sign of regret. Instead, he sat back calmly and looked at me like I was nothing. There was no guilt in his face, no hesitation in his voice. He said it bluntly, "She's on my level. You never were." I felt the words hit me like a slap. I had done everything for him, stood by him, supported him without ever asking for anything in return. And now, I was being told I wasn't enough, not smart enough, not stylish enough, not ambitious enough. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just stood up, grabbed a few things, and said he was leaving. No apology, no goodbye, just a cold statement and the sound of the door closing behind him. The next morning, his side of the closet was empty. He was gone, just like that. I stood in the silence, surrounded by memories that suddenly felt like lies. Everything we had built together now felt fake. I kept going over his words in my head, trying to understand how someone I had loved so deeply could be so cruel, so indifferent. I had begged him through tears, asked him if the life we had meant anything. He never gave a real answer. Maybe that was the answer in itself. When people found out, most assumed I had lost everything. Friends pitied me. Family stayed quiet, unsure what to say. From the outside, it looked like I had been left with nothing, abandoned by the man I loved, replaced by someone younger, flashier, louder. No one knew the truth behind the scenes. No one knew what I still had, or who I truly was. I didn't correct them. I let them think what they wanted. What hurt the most wasn't the cheating. It was how easily he walked away, as if the years meant nothing, as if I was never a part of his real plan. That night changed everything. The begging stopped. The tears stopped. The part of me that believed in him stopped. After he left, their relationship became public almost immediately. Pictures of them flooded social media, brunches at rooftop restaurants, weekend yacht parties, luxury trips, and matching designer outfits. They looked like the perfect couple, always smiling, always showing off the next big thing. People admired her, envied her. She had the look, the money, the lifestyle. To everyone watching, it seemed like she had it all. Her followers praised her for being glamorous and successful. They believed she had built everything herself. She gave interviews, talked about hard work and manifesting abundance, acting like she was living proof that dreams came true. But the truth was far from what they saw on their screens. What no one realized was how much of her life was borrowed. The champagne brunches were hosted by hotels in exchange for posts. The designer bags were loaned for photo shoots. The penthouse she often filmed in? It wasn't hers. It was rented by the hour for content creation. Her entire image was carefully crafted, maintained through sponsored deals, free products, and carefully edited captions. She looked rich, but the money wasn't hers, not in the way people assumed. And while she was busy selling the illusion, I stayed quiet. I watched from the background, saying nothing. I had no interest in fame or proving anything to the world. I didn't need to, because behind the scenes, I had taken a different route, one that didn't require showing off or chasing attention. The very brand she partnered with, the one she proudly promoted in almost every post, had silent investors. I was one of them. I had purchased shares months before her name ever appeared on their marketing list. Every time she posed in their clothes or tagged them in a post, part of the return came back to me. She thought she was building herself up. In reality, she was helping grow my portfolio. Not long after, I made another quiet move. Through a holding company, I acquired a significant stake in the agency that booked her deals. It wasn't personal, it was business. She didn't know, he didn't know. No one knew. I didn't want revenge through words or confrontation. I wanted control, real, lasting control. Everything they flaunted was temporary. It looked shiny on the outside but had no depth. Meanwhile, I was building quietly, owning pieces of the world they pretended to belong to. I didn't need to post proof or announce my wins. I didn't need followers or validation. While she curated her life for likes, I shaped mine for longevity. She sold images, I owned assets, and slowly, piece by piece, I positioned myself in places she didn't even know existed. Let her keep the spotlight. I was fine being invisible. After all, power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like silence and ownership. I didn't argue. I didn't post anything. I didn't try to defend myself. While they flaunted their happiness and showed off their perfect life, I stayed quiet. I let them believe they had won. But silence doesn't mean weakness. I wasn't planning to fight with words. I had other ways. I focused on what I knew best: strategy. I didn't waste time watching their updates or wondering what they were doing. I kept my attention on my work, my plans, and what needed to be done next. There was no anger in my actions, only clarity. I wasn't interested in making a scene. I was interested in results. One of my first steps was through real estate. I found out the exact condo they were living in, not through spying or drama, but through quiet research. It didn't take much. They shared just enough online to reveal where they stayed. I followed the trail, not to confront, but to acquire. Through a holding company with no direct links to me, I purchased the property. It took a little time, some paperwork, and quiet negotiations, but soon enough, the place was mine. They didn't know. No one did. That was the point. I wasn't looking for attention. I was simply removing the stage they stood on. A few months later, I let the lease expire. No renewal, no warning. Just a notice that the unit was no longer available. They had to leave, without knowing why or who was behind it. I didn't need to watch them pack or see their reaction. I already knew what it meant. They lost their view, their backdrop, their comfort. Just like that. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't celebrate publicly, but I smiled to myself. Not out of bitterness, but because I had taken back control in the quietest way possible. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't seek revenge in the way they would have expected. Instead, I made one simple move, and everything shifted. Sometimes, the most powerful response isn't loud or angry. It's calm, it's careful, and it leaves no trace. Only a door closed behind them, and a future they never saw coming. Things started to shift not long after they moved out of the condo. Her perfect world, so carefully built for the public eye, began to show cracks. The luxury lifestyle she portrayed relied heavily on one major sponsorship, a brand she promoted in nearly every post. It gave her free products, invitations to exclusive events, and the image of success. It was her main source of visibility, and she depended on it more than people realized. Behind the scenes, I had already made my move. Through a different LLC, far removed from anything that could be traced back to me, I acquired the parent company that owned the brand. It wasn't personal, it was strategic. Once the acquisition was finalized, I reviewed the contracts. Her name was on one of them, tied to a short-term influencer agreement. Quietly and professionally, the decision was made not to renew it. There was no public fallout, just silence. One day, she was tagging the brand in every photo, and the next, it disappeared from her content completely. No announcements, no statement, just gone. To the outside world, it looked like a shift in direction, but I knew what it really was. A piece of her foundation had fallen. Shortly after that, he reached out to me. His message was carefully worded, but it was clear. He said he missed how calm things used to be, how peaceful I made life feel. He mentioned how I never made things difficult, how I understood him in ways she never could. He talked about how lost he felt without the stability I brought. For a moment, I stared at the message in disbelief. The same man who once said I wasn't on his level now missed the very things he once rejected. I didn't reply. There was no satisfaction to be found in his regret. I had no interest in reopening old doors or hearing apologies too late. I passed the message along to my assistant, who sent back a simple, polite response. "Ms. Carter wishes you well." That was it. No drama, no explanations, just a closed door and a calm goodbye. He had chosen his path, and now he had to live with it. I didn't need to argue, and I certainly didn't need to forgive. The turning point wasn't just in how things changed for them, it was in how I felt. I no longer carried the pain of betrayal. I had nothing left to prove. I had taken back control of my life, not with anger, but with grace and intention. Watching it all unfold from a distance, I felt no guilt, just clarity. Months passed, and I kept moving forward. I had no desire to look back. My time was now focused on growing what I had built quietly over the years. While others chased visibility, I stayed behind the scenes, making calculated decisions, investing where it mattered, and expanding my reach in industries that rarely made headlines. Then, an invitation arrived, subtle, professional, and respectful. A private wealth conference was being hosted in New York, and the organizers asked if I would speak on a panel. The topic: wealth, legacy, and the power of staying discreet in a loud world. I almost declined. I wasn't someone who liked to be on stage or in the spotlight, but something about the invitation felt timely. I accepted. The event was intimate but powerful, full of people who understood the value of quiet influence. I didn't share names or personal details. I simply spoke about financial discipline, long-term strategy, and how the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The crowd responded with quiet respect, nods of understanding, and questions that reflected curiosity, not intrusion. Shortly after the panel, Forbes published an article. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it made an impact. The headline called me the hidden heiress, who had quietly built a $70 million portfolio through trust, tech, and tact. The story didn't go viral, but in the right circles, it was read and remembered. Word got around fast. People who had once seen me as just another quiet woman in the background suddenly saw me through a different lens. They realized I hadn't disappeared after the divorce. I had simply never needed to be seen in the first place. And among those who came across the article were his friends. Some of them shared the link with him, not knowing what had happened between us, just thinking it was impressive. That same evening, I saw his name light up on my phone. He called twice. Then he messaged, saying he'd read the article. He wrote that he was proud of me, that he always knew I was smart, that maybe things could have been different if he had understood me better. There was a tone of nostalgia in his words, maybe even regret, but there was nothing left to say. I didn't answer. I didn't acknowledge the message. I had no anger, but I also had no interest. I forwarded the message to my assistant. She sent a short, clear reply. "Ms. Carter is unavailable and wishes you continued success." Then, I blocked his number, not out of spite, but out of peace. That chapter had closed long ago. I didn't need him to see my worth. I had already built it, lived it, and shared it with people who respected it from the beginning. Recognition didn't change who I was. It just confirmed what I already knew. The view from this place is calm, peaceful. It's not just the height or the luxury. It's the feeling of finally being free. This home isn't something I bought to prove anything. It's just mine, quiet, strong, and real. A space that reflects who I truly am, not who I had to pretend to be. Sometimes I think about the woman I was when he left, the one who knelt on the floor, asking him to stay. I don't hate her. I feel for her. She loved deeply and gave everything without holding back. But she's grown. She learned to stop giving her light to someone who only ever saw shadows. Now, I sit in a place she could only dream of back then. Not because I changed who I was, but because I stopped hiding it. The companies she used to post about, wear, and talk about like trophies, I run them now, quietly, confidently. No hashtags, no spotlight, just decisions, results, and ownership. I don't wear the brands, I'm behind them. And I don't need to show off because I've learned something far more powerful. True wealth doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. He once looked at me and saw someone beneath him. He said, I lacked ambition, that I was too comfortable. But in the end, it wasn't me who lacked vision. It was him. He couldn't see past surface things. And now, he's stuck with that choice. I don't feel anger anymore. I don't want payback. I don't want him to hurt. What I want is nothing. And in that nothing, I found everything. There's no greater closure than peace. Not silence out of pride, but silence out of knowing that I stayed true to myself. I didn't have to fight dirty or chase attention. I just lived. And that was enough. He left thinking I had nothing, thinking I'd crumble. But I didn't. I rose, quietly, powerfully, and fully. And now he'll carry the weight of that choice for the rest of his life. And me, I'll keep sitting here on my own terms, in a life I built, in a home that's mine, with a heart that's finally free. And that's more than enough. Do you think he ever truly understood what he gave up? Or was he just chasing something that was never real to begin with? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and let me know what you think.